Okay, well, I am so grateful, first, that everybody is here, and it sounds like there's a lot of good energy in the room. I'm going to ask you not to have your laptops open during this time, and I would ask maybe if there is somebody or a couple of people who'd be willing to be note takers for our guest speaker today, if anything comes up, that then could share the notes. And I have one or two people who'd be willing to do that, who are good at, who like to take paper notes.
I mean, I'm not very good at taking notes, but I will take notes.
Okay, okay, and well,
I'm also not sure they'll be good.
well, that's good. We have a backup. Okay, I would like to introduce our speaker today, our visitor and our guest, Gorakh. He is said we can call him by his first name. I put a little bio of you on their assignment sheet, so hopefully they have a little bit of context for you. But he is also taping himself, not you, okay? But he likes to, as you might know, he has some YouTube presentations, and so he likes to be able to look back on them and also share them with the wider audience. So I will turn things over to you, and this is period 5, World Religions at Castaways.
Hello. We'll begin the right way. We'll begin with an opening prayer in Sanskrit. You'll get to hear a little bit of the Sanskrit. The description's already with you. Hopefully she would have mailed it over. So you have the opening and closing prayers, but you'll get a sense of what it sounds and feels like. We're going to be sitting upright. So we'll be sitting up, both sides of the hips on the seat, sitting with the back straight, the back, neck, and head in a straight line. I'll be asking you to chant Om, which is the word that's right next to, when you see it says Hinduism on the poster, it has a little thing written on it. That sign is the written form of the chant we're about to do. We're going to just make the sound Om. You're going to want to make the Om in the way that feels the most comfortable to you, which is you should feel the vibration. You'll feel it in your belly, you'll feel it in your chest, you'll feel it in your head, all over. But pay attention and just try to enjoy the sound. We'll be making it 3 times. So take your own time to go through the chant. Then I'll be chanting the opening prayers. All right? So just sit with your back straight. Sit with the back, neck, and head in a straight line. Close your eyes gently. Relax the expression on the face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. Now for the next few breaths, keep your attention in your belly. As you inhale into the belly. And as you exhale, just let go. Inhaling into the belly. As you exhale, just let go of any unfinished business, any sense of frenetic activity. Just let go and be present in this room for the next hour. Breathing into the belly, exhaling and letting go. Now bring your palms together at the heart center, pressing the palms together gently, pressing the fingers together gently, and gently touching the back of the thumbs into the chest. Now bring your attention to the hollow space between the palms. Pay attention to any vibration, any sensation, any electricity, anything that you might feel in your palms. And keep your attention all the way here through the rest of this chant. We'll be chanting Om 3 times. Take a slow time to chant it when you chant it. Now, exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. It works better if you chant as well. Inhale. Inhale. Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Rub your palms together to generate some heat and gently cup your eyeballs to transfer that heat, and then blinking open your eyes and pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar. So I teach at another high school where I meet seniors and juniors to talk about also world religions class and talking about Hinduism. So I have some experience, but every time is different. So I'd like to make sure I answer your questions about Hinduism. I'm born into a Hindu family. I grew up in India. I've been here in the US, in California for 20 years. And in addition to having been born in a Hindu family, I'm also a yogi of the studio variety. I teach free classes at the temple. I also teach meditation, and I also run a program on weekends teaching the tradition to people over here. So I have some breadth of experience with Hinduism, so any question that you would have is acceptable. Don't worry about offending me, because I'm not easily offended. So if you have any question, I'd be happy to answer them. We'll write them on the board and we'll tackle them one by one. Before that, I have a question for you. Have you met a Hindu person before? You've all met a Hindu person before. Have you had an interaction like this before? Are you looking forward to it? All right, let's start. I have a few topics to cover, but I'd like to make sure I capture your questions. What questions do you have from either reading that book, or from the reading material Ms. Lane has sent you, or the PDF that she's also sent you, and from previous discussions? Yes?
One of the things that was mentioned in the book was kind of how Hinduism hasn't necessarily spread too far beyond India, and yet the traditions have spread. Do you see like the spreading of yoga and meditation as a spread of the religion, or is it closer to cultural appropriation?
Okay. What's the next question? What else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, one of the documents that we were reading talked about sort of the institutional expectations of Hindu people and how a lot of that foundation was based on the existence of a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how has Hinduism evolved now that the caste system is sort of fading out of existence?
Those are my favorite C words for any lecture with an American audience, which is caste. And I'd be very disappointed if you don't ask me about the cows. More questions? Yes, ma'am.
We've been learning about karma, and something
Yes.
that I was wondering is who or what decides what is good karma and what's bad karma. And then also something I was wondering about is do people ever try and cheat the system, if that makes sense? Do people intentionally do bad things because they know that they can make up for it by doing good things?
All right. Yes.
Just quickly adding on to the karma thing, just if different actions hold different weights, or also how that's decided.
More questions? Is this side silent? Yes.
So kind of going back to Sarah's question about karma, in the book it mentions that negative karma can, or behaviors that do not align with one's personal duty or dharma, as it says in the book. What exactly does that mean, and like how does one know what their personal moral duty is?
That's a beautiful question. I could do the entire class just on that question. That's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
In the book, it talked a lot about how Hinduism is mostly individual practices, and they didn't really go into like more communal practices. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that.
Yes.
I was just wondering, like, what common misconceptions you like see or hear about Hinduism?
Common misconceptions.
One article that we read talked about good learning needing friction, and I was wondering how are students really encouraged to challenge their professors or their teachers, and how does that work?
This is related to Bella's question on the individual versus the group. But in the like prayers that we read, there was a couple that really focused like community and like helping everyone kind of like get better is not the right word, but like have everyone kind of help each other.
Yeah.
But then also like it's just kind of a more specific, but like are like those communal prayers, or are they meant to be like in a community, or like how, because like Bella said, like it seems a lot more individualistic, but then also there's a big emphasis on community.
Is that everything? Great, all right. So I'm going to just start talking, and we'll try to get all the questions along the way. So Hinduism comes from the broader Indian subcontinental region, but the Indian subcontinent and between India and China, those two regions, those were major world powers economically, not militarily, for a long period of time. So we often read in world history, we often read about European history or European and Middle Eastern, sort of North African history. And it's often that those are the histories that we learn in the West. But a deeper, wider, more interesting history lies on further out east of Europe, in China and India. And these regions were the economic superpowers for a considerable length of time, and for hundreds, thousands of years. The advantage of being America, for example, are that we have a very docile neighbor up north and up south and down south. So they're not about to attack us anytime soon, and we're landlocked on the other side. So if someone wants to reach us, they better be building long distance missile capability. So India happens to be similarly landlocked. It has the Himalayas to the top, and there's a narrow range on the left side of where Afghanistan is now, where you can sort of come in, but you really can't. And below that, it's like the United States. It's landlocked. There's ocean on both sides. What that means is this is a land protected. It has ample water. It has a season system which allows it to grow crops. And so there's good rivers, there's very fertile land because the waters are good, and protected from invasion. So for long periods of time, this region has had significant economic strength. And when a culture grows rich, first you build homes and toilets and roads, the basic infrastructure of a civilization. But when you've had roads for 100 years, what do you do next? In parallel, you start building out culture, languages, arts, and humanities, that sort of stuff. When you've been in that business for longer, then you start thinking about, okay, what do we know about what makes society work better? And how can we convey that information to our children? And that means your language becomes more sophisticated over time. And you're able to articulate very nuanced ideas to your future generations, and you can educate them on those. if you do it even longer, you really come to the foundational question of Indian spiritual texts. So the story hasn't reached the Hindu spiritual texts by this time. You enter the Hindu spiritual texts maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000 years ago, depends on when they were sung. But you almost always enter with the following question. It begins with Athat Brahma Jignasa. I'm not going to ask you to write it, but I'll tell you what it means. It just means, and now, therefore, a curiosity about the true nature of reality. So that's when Hindu tradition begins. That's the foundational question. What is all this? What makes everything work? What hangs everything together? And so that question leads to really interesting places. Has everyone seen The Matrix? Right? So if you've seen The Matrix, then you know that this is a simulation, and there have been other simulations and so on, right? You can't tell if you're in The Matrix, but if you're not from The Matrix, you know. That idea comes all the way back to the Matrix comes from mother, which is the sort of the root word for that. Another root word similar to that is Maya, the veil of illusion. And so the Hindus had concluded way back when, before the Matrix, that this world is an illusion. And it takes a lot of time and practice and confidence to be able to conclude that everything that you see isn't quite there. Because everything evidently is right here. I do have a pen in my hand, you are sitting in this class. So how is it that someone can say something that's so counterintuitive and be confident in saying that? And so the important thing is, it takes a long cultural build-up to get to this question. And it takes a long cultural build-up from this point onward to arrive at the conclusion that this reality is not quite as it appears. And there are ways of transcending this reality. And at that point, you have to figure out, how do you communicate this to everybody else? Not everyone can go to the Himalayas and sit in a cave and meditate for 12 years or 24 years or 36 years. It's not something that everyone can and should do. You can't run a good society where everyone's a hermit. Right? So you got to have a society where people are earning and they're donating, and some people do this hard work. They come back and tell us what they found. But they have to be able to tell us in a way that people can find useful. So for example, if I were to tell you that I'm enlightened, and we'll come to that question shortly, and that therefore I see through this reality, I'm no longer bound to the matrix. As I see you, I see that you don't quite exist, but you're there. If I were to say that to you, how would you believe me? Plus, the more important question from your perspective is, why should you care? Why should you care if this is all, somebody says that this is all the matrix and this is all an illusion? How does it alter your life? So then the society's question is, how do we lead a better life? How do we lead a better life that's more complete, a deeper sort of life? What does it mean to live and to live fully? And so the Hindu society also spent a lot of time figuring that out. Now the challenge with approaching Hinduism from outside a practitioner's perspective is that often you're autopsying a dead body. If someone's describing the tradition from the outside, they're describing, well, he has an arm, 2 arms maybe, now he has 2 legs. The patient is already dead. Someone's autopsying from outside and describing the parts, the lived part, the living part of the person's already gone. You understand? So when you do it from the outside, it's very difficult to know the tradition. So when you read a book, it's hard, even for me as a practitioner, it's hard for me to relate to anything that's written in a book about my tradition from the outside. Because what happens is they describe the non-living parts of the tradition, but don't get to the living part of the tradition. And that's the interesting part. So a tradition, going back to what I was saying. So this tradition, the Hindu tradition, while now the Hindu tradition is coming from India, the broader search for truth has been around in all of humanity. What is the truth? And every tradition has come to answers about the truth. What they've also realized is that the truth is there is an absolute truth. There's also relative truth, and both of those matter because I'll bring it back to you. The question is, what does it mean to live a complete life, a full life, to be engaged in your life in the most full manner possible? Because that's the question that you should really care about. Why are you going about your life without thinking about it? Because when it comes to the end of your life, you might realize that you didn't think about your life. You sleepwalked through your life, and at the end, you realize that you could have lived it differently if you had thought harder about it. Some people did think about it, and they let everybody else know. That's how the Hindu tradition plays it. So there are objectives for life which are articulated. There are stages of life which are articulated. There are types of work that are articulated. There are ways of engaging with each other that are articulated. All of those are part of the Hindu tradition. The Hindu tradition isn't just one scripture or one god or one temple or one sect. The Hindu tradition is very broad. It's ocean-like in its breadth and depth. So the scripture are quite interesting. Sometimes they describe ritual. Sometimes they describe stories of kings and people. Sometimes they describe interactions. Right now I'm rambling because I'm trying to give you a sense of the breadth of what's going on. But a lot of the Hindu tradition has passed from one generation to other through rituals and practices. And even more interestingly, through stories. The Hindu tradition is a deep well source of storytelling. And those stories are not in vain. They're not just, this is the Avengers 24 movie series. Those stories are always about something. So two of the biggest stories, the biggest epics that you have in the Hindu tradition are stories about the following question. And they came to very opposite answers to that question, but the question was, what is the right thing to do? What is the truth, and what is the right thing to do? So in one story, there's a king. He has 4 sons. His oldest son is about to become king, and some shenanigans happen, and that son is banished. He and his wife go on, and his brother go into the forest. Wife is kidnapped. And the rest of the story is him finding allies to go win his wife back from the other guy. Slay the demon, bring the other wife back. That's the story. But that story is about what is the right thing to do. The next story that I'm going to spend a little more time on is the Mahabharata, which is the story of 2 warring families. They're essentially 2 cousin brothers. But the entire Indian subcontinent, and the broader Indian sort of community of nations is now on one side or another. They have picked sides. And this is a battle between what is the right way to govern, what is the right way to manage your society. And it all comes down to one of the highest scriptural sort of pieces in the Hindu tradition, the Bhagavad Gita. And I will write that down because it will come up again. This is set quite dramatically. This is a big all-out battle, 4.5 million people on both sides. And just before the battle begins, the rule of the battle are that you can't fight until both sides are ready and they've declared that they're about to start. So the war hasn't begun, the battle hasn't begun. It's day 0 of an 18-day battle. Everyone dies, by the way. It's a spoiler. But on day 0, the ace archer from one side asks his driver, who happens to be God incarnate, to take him to the middle of the battlefield so that he could survey the opposite army. And he sits just like I sit, and he surveys the opposite side, and he sees, here's my cousin, here's my uncle, here's my teacher, here's my brother-in-law, here's my nephew. They're all my people. And he has an immediate panic attack. And the way he describes his panic attack is fun. I did a talk, I really enjoyed it, where he describes his panic attack just the way Eminem describes his panic attack in Lose Yourself. Literally, I did a side by side, it's a lot of fun. But anyway, he has a panic attack because he says this doesn't seem like it's worth it. And then 700 verses later, it's decided. And so what his driver, Sri Krishna, says to him is, what your duty is in any moment is very hard to know. I'm going to give you 3 ways to know your duty. Because what this guy is doing is, the archer is doing is, he's running away from his duty. They have come to this war, this battle, because they've run out of options. And the problem is not that one side needs the land and the other side does not need the land. It's that what is right. The battle is about what is the right thing to do. Who's the rightful king and who's the rightful ruler who can serve the populace. So this is a just war in that sense, and your job is to do whatever your job is to do, but you don't know it, so you're running away from it. And then in 700 verses, he gives them 3 ways to know what your duties are. So I'm addressing your question over here. What are my duties? Is very tough. It is very tough because my duty can vary with time, with context, and with place. Depending on who I'm talking to, what my relationship with them is, what my arrangement with them is, what the social norms of the time are, and what is the right thing to do at that moment might vary. And so if you write it down and say, here are my 10 commandments, then those commandments are out of date when 10.1 comes around. Right? Something changes and the commandments have changed. So that's the reason the right thing to do is very hard to find. And so those 3 ways that are described are, and this is, remember, in the middle of a battle, both sides are almost ready to fight. He says, here's the way to meditate and know the truth. Here's the way to be devotionally surrendering yourself to the universe or God and know the truth. And here's the way to engage yourself in your work and know the truth. He describes 3 ways, and then he says, okay, now the decision is yours. You do what you think is the right thing to do. Naturally, he goes back to fighting, and the rest carries on. But the point of this is that all these stories that the Hindus have told ourselves, the stories are a very potent means of communicating truth. Why? Because if I tell you something dry, if I, for example, say E is equals MC squared, that's great, but it doesn't do anything for you. 1, 2, you got to remember it, you got to memorize it. Then you have to know what E means, what M means, what C means, and what squaring means. And then you still haven't got to making an atomic bomb yet. Right? So there's a lot going on in there. So if you now tell people a story, they remember. And so information travels longer distance when you tell it, when you put it into a story. Just the way if you've had a mango, the sweeter the fruit, the more that seed travels, because more people want to eat it. Right? And so the sweetness of the stories, the sweetness of the tradition, all conveys the truth, even to people that are not scientists or philosophers. So it becomes down to rules of thumb. So that's the broad context. What is the right thing to do at any given point of time is very subtle. What my thing to do at any given point of time is very subtle. And that's why all of these stories have been told in the Hindu tradition. Hindus are outwardly believe in millions of gods. And so often the accusation is that this is a weird religion with weird looking gods, and lots of them. And that's actually true, but it's not true. We do have gods that are interesting looking. But frankly, if I told you that the Avengers has 20 people and they're all the same, you wouldn't be interested in it. Right? You gotta have people with different personalities. One has a a thing in his heart, another has something else, another shoots out spider webs. You get it, right? It's more interesting that way, is it not? That's how you remember stuff. That's how you encode information. So all of these are very powerful way of communicating the truth. It's not that Hindus believe in many gods. This is not a Greco-Roman god type thing where gods are at war with each other. We do have those people, but those people are lower in the Hindu tradition than divinity itself. God is one. We are all God. And that comes to the central truth of the Hindu tradition, that if you say there is a God who's bearded and lives in heaven up above, that's a faraway God. And if Nietzsche said God is dead, you probably believe him because you haven't seen a bearded God in heaven. You don't even know if there's a heaven, right? What you do know is that the world outside seems to exist. What you are somewhat sure of is that you seem to exist. So outside of you, there seems to be something. Inside of you, there seems to be someone. Is anyone here who does not believe that to be the case? That outside of you there appears to be things, there are things, right? Inside of you, you feel that there is someone, a you-ness. Agreed? All right, as long as we agree on this, the question is, what separates the inside from the outside? And is that separation real? If you put a bucket out, if you have a cup here if I put a cup over here, it's empty inside, or it has air inside and air outside. Only the cup boundary separates the inside and the outside. Nothing's different. If you pour it into water, if you put the cup into water, it has water inside and water outside. Agreed? So only the boundary separates the inside and the outside. The material is the same. So in the Hindu tradition, divinity pervades everything, inside and outside. The only thing is we believe that we exist independent of everything, of divinity. Our independence is the illusion. The fact that we think that we are independent of each other is the illusion. And that's the illusion you want to rise out of. So when you talk about enlightenment, the Hindu enlightenment is different from the sort of post-Middle Age and rational enlightenment of the West. Even though we use the same words, because no one asked the Hindus what our word was. Because, if you asked our word, we'd give you 5 or 15, who knows. So the enlightenment of the Hindu tradition is very different in that sense. The enlightenment is that of the Buddha, who is he's awake, he's woken out of his slumber, right? What does it mean to wake out? It's to wake up to the reality that's all around. I'm going to pause here. I'll tell you another thing, then hopefully everything will come together. Does everyone here sleep? You're in high school, so not too much sleep, I suppose, but you all sleep. When you sleep, perchance, do you dream? Some people dream. In your dreams, do you see everyone as yourself? It's you, and then there's also another you, there's another you. You see other people? Where are those other people? Are those real? In your dream they are. Right? They appear to be there. You interact with them. You have conversations with them. And then when you wake up, what happens? Where are those people that you dreamt of? They're gone? Did you kill them? Did you snap your... Something happened. They're not there anymore. Now, would you agree that they're also made of you? For the convenience of having a dream, you chose to forget that each of the other people in your dream are also you. Because only then it's a fun dream. Otherwise, it's just me here, me here, me here, and what's the point of that dream? I'm just talking to myself. Does anyone disagree with this understanding of dreams? So if you can wake out of that dream, surely you can wake out of this dream as well and realize the innate connectedness of everything. That the separation between you and me is only nominal because you have chosen to forget that you and I are the same person. I have chosen to forget that. That all of this material reality that appears to be material and very solid Science already says it's not solid, it's mostly space. There's an electron, which is a bundle of probabilities buzzing around, and there's a lot of space between that and the nucleus, and that also is a bundle of probabilities. Everything is energy anyway. So nothing is solid from science. Something is solid in your experience. But what the Hindus get to is, through all these practices, we realize that there's nothing that actually here. It all appears to be here, but that's all a dreamlike state. And you can get out of this dreamlike state. When you get out of this dreamlike state, as the Buddha did and many others did in the Hindu tradition, then you realize that everyone is interconnected. How would you lead your life knowing that everyone is interconnected? Would that change your outlook towards life? If you knew in your dream that that other person is also you, would you be kinder to them? Would you relate to them as your own? Right? And that is how we come to the cliche of our times, namaste. Namaste is really, I bow to the divinity within you. The divinity within me bows to the divinity within you. What that means is simply, I recognize you as myself. We are just nominally different. From that, you can actually derive any number of moral and ethical codes. The problem is that this truth is not evident, and in fact, it's contrary to intuition. I'm telling you this, I'm sitting in front of you to tell you this, you don't believe a word of what I just said. You don't think the world is an illusion, it appears to be there. You don't think that you and I are the same person, because that is evidently not the case. You hear it, but you don't understand it. And that's the challenge of communicating this information. But like, I have not done primary physics, which means that I'm not here conducting experiments or thought experiments. I believe Einstein when he says E equals mc squared. I believe Newton when he says this is the theory of gravitational attraction. I believe them because I think they've done their work, and hopefully if they're disproved, somebody else better will come. It's the same with the Hindu tradition. There are saints and sages who figured stuff out. They tell us what they found. It's subject to discussion. Once it's discussed, it becomes part of the normal culture, and it's off to the races from that point on. Now let's start answering questions. I'm going to pause. Have I lost everyone in the storytelling I've just done? Am I still holding your interest? You can tell me to amp up the energy level or tamp it. It's all good. I realize that I speak really fast, and that's how I carry my little video camera around, because I watch myself later and I'm cringing. One, I have a really terrible accent, that's just me. But the second thing is I speak really fast. And when you're doing this sort of spiritual discourse, you gotta speak slow. But that's not me. So you can tell me to slow down. All right, so now let's talk about appropriation. Hinduism isn't a religion of the English language variety. The English language definition of religion is extremely narrow. And so there is a separation of church and state, and science and religion are at loggerheads, and politics cannot get into it, and there's nothing that English word religion says about how to eat healthy, how to live healthy. There's nothing, right? There's just a set of rules and guidelines which were probably correct at the time, unless they were mistranslated and misinterpreted. We don't know. That's the word English, in English, which is religion. The Hindu word that we use typically is different. We call it Sanatan Dharma. These two words contain a paradox, and that having paradoxes into our discourse is a normal part of everyday Indian living. There's a lot of paradoxes. Sanatan means that which is always true. Sanatan is always true. It's outside of time and context. Dharma, on the other hand, is the universal foundation of life and relationships. And that's always changing with context. And so between those two words, you've got an understanding of that which never changes and that which changes all the time. And the search for this truth is what makes a Hindu Hindu, or that's what the tradition is. And in that sense, it's a really much broader, it's the broadest possible definition of religion. Which means in this set of ideas is our insights into how to govern if you're a ruler, how to work if you're a worker bee, how to engage with your family, how to engage with everybody else, how to eat, when to eat, what's seasonal, what's not seasonal, that sort of stuff. All of that information is encoded in the same set of interconnected systems. And so is Hinduism a cultural pattern? It is a cultural pattern. It is a political pattern. It is a religious pattern. It is a socio-economic pattern. It's all of the above. So when you reduce it to religion, you're looking for a set of rules that define it. And if you try, in the Hindu tradition, if you try to define something, it's like that Schrodinger's cat thing, right? It's either dead or alive, but if you try to find out, it's dead. Right? And so it's the same situation with Hinduism. If you try to define Hinduism with a set of rules, you've immediately walked away from Hinduism. It's no longer consistent with the tradition. So in that sense, I'm going to start answering your questions because we're going to run out of time. Namaste, I've talked about. Is it appropriation? It's all good. It's actually all good unless you're a bad guy. So I'll give you an example, and I don't know. Okay, I'm not even going to draw it because it might just scandalize the heck out of people. But it's essentially a hooked cross, if you know what I'm talking about. I can't draw it. So I'll say the Sanskrit word for it. You're still going to be scandalized. I guarantee it. It's an ancient symbol, and it's considered holy in pretty much every ancient culture. It's not typical to India. It's typical of India, China, Japan, even out in I think in the West, wherever. It's a swastika.
Oh yeah.
So if you take our tradition and you then use it for nefarious purposes, then that's no bueno. That's no good at all, because what are we going to do with that? You've just stolen our words and you made something bad out of it. Right? And so that's the problem. Is having turmeric latte appropriation? Yeah, it's not even that good. But you can have it if you like it. If is doing a color run or a color festival where people throw water and color at each other, is that appropriation? Yeah, but if it's fun, well, come on in. Why not? Out in Stanford, they do
We've got
holy.
it here too.
It's great. If you want to do it, have at it. But the thing is, you're taking piecemeal parts of a living system. And wouldn't you be better off understanding the full system? It's not just the outer fringes of Hinduism that you want. And the reason I say that is because you're going to come to the central question of why people don't engage with Hinduism. It's this. People think that the caste system is core to the Hindu tradition. Right? And that, I'm happy to tell you that it is not. The word caste is a Portuguese word. It comes from the Portuguese word for purity. Chastity comes from the same source. So Europeans came in and they were looking for the way their class society is divided, and their royals cannot marry serfs or commoners. They came to India, they're the ruling class, and they ask questions in English, which we do not understand. So they ask, how are you divided? Well, we told, in India, the caste system can be any number of things. The family you're born into, the social class you're into, the educational levels, any number of things can determine the socioeconomic strata that you're in. And any old society has socioeconomic strata that may be frozen or quasi-frozen. It doesn't mean your religion is all about that. It has nothing to do with religion. Does the religion say that people will do 4 different types of work? Yes. Because we do 4 different kinds of work, either thinking or fighting or building things or doing things, right? And so that's varna, which is a profession choice that you make. That's not the same thing as the caste system. So is the caste system necessary? Not at all. No one cares for it, other than for the last 200 years, everyone who's been educated, even in India, in English, believes that the caste system is a thing. It's not a thing. The tradition does not actually understand caste system. There are other words that we use, but they're not. They're almost always reduced to the caste system. So I want to clarify that. Karma. What is karma? Can you beat it? So here's the real question. I'm going to get this very quickly because I'm racing against the timer. Can I beat the clock? So what is karma? When you ask the question, how does everything work? You're going to realize that things are not random. I hope you realize that the universe is non-random. Is there anyone, please raise your right hand if you think the universe is random? Stuff happens on its own.
Not like fully, but sometimes.
Quasi-random? That's a great answer, yes.
Sometimes I think it's random.
Kind of, sort of random. Okay, maybe random sometimes. Bad things seem to happen to good people, yes? And so you think it's random. So the real question is this. You're in a great school, in a great city, in a great state, in a great country. If you were born in any other situation, you'd be a little worse off. Would you agree, socioeconomically? And is that your fault? Not really, right? So the question is, if the majority of the truths of your life are based on the random event of you being here in this country at this time, then why are you trying to optimize the rest of your life if so much of your life is based on a random factoid? Right? If there's so much randomness built into your life because you're born here versus any other city or any other state, then surely the universe is random. But you're going to agree that the universe, it just makes sense that the universe is not random. Right? So there must be some rules by which the universe works. The rules must be intuited. You must try to understand what is the rule. Causes must lead to effects. Effects must have causes. Once you understand that, Newton said that, of course, but once you understand that effects must have causes, you're going to get directly into the theory of karma, which is actions have consequences. Sometimes they have consequences in indirect ways. Why? Because they might happen over long periods of time. But if you're bound by a short life, then your question is, then my actions have no consequences. Right? Because I've done all the bad stuff, now I'm dead, good luck, goodbye, and I just ran a karma debt, but what do I care, I'm dead. Right? So then you have to then come back to the other insight of Hinduism. If this is not quite true, then it must be the case that me being in this body, me embodied in this physical form, is just a temporary thing. It's this set of clothes today, it'll be another set of clothes tomorrow. The transmigration of an essence of me from one body to another is a central part of Hindu tradition, which you might know as reincarnation. Once you account for time, then the universe is very non-random. Would you agree? Can you beat karma? You can't beat karma. That is the law. That's the whole point of this thing. Is the laws of karma are ironclad. You begin with that axiomatic belief. You can't beat karma. Once you extend your existence into multiple lifetimes, there's no running away from it. It'll catch up with you. And so no running away from karma. And so how it works, we'll just describe it. In fact, the earliest Hindu scripture begins with this question, which is, how does everything work? Why is it that it rains in December in California? What's the seasonality? How does everything hang together? What is the cause and effect of things happening the way they're happening? And that led them to the understanding of Rita, which you might know as rhythm, how things interact with the Rita. So Rigveda begins with this question, how does everything work? And then later with us, they do their other stuff. But the point is, everything works in some sort of mechanism. You don't need to believe in God to believe that things are non-chaotic, non-random. Right? But the Hindus came into the concept of God from this direction as well. They said, well, if there's order, surely there must be a mechanism for this order. And whatever is that mechanism for maintaining order, we'll call it God. It's the invisible hand of the market, for example. Is there a Mr. Market who has visible hands? No, you intuit that there must be an invisible hand of the market. So that's how the Hindus come into it. Common misconceptions, I want to come to it in a second. Friction and learning. So the Hindu tradition is a very vibrant and interesting tradition. The philosophy part of Hindu tradition and the logic part of Hindu tradition are extremely well articulated. and they worked by a series of interchange. It is, so you'll read these stories where they've organized a conference of people from around the country. People come in and they debate the heck out of each other. If you lose, you have to now accept the other one as a master. So those debates are recorded. Lots of debate. To the extent that even Buddhism was spoken by the Buddha in Pali, which is the colloquial language. But when they needed to start writing logic and philosophy down, they had to switch over to Sanskrit because the technical words for that are only available in Sanskrit. So they had to go back to the original language because that's how they could use. So friction was very welcome and engaged with all the time. And friction is always good. You have to, and I don't have enough time today to describe it, but friction is a really good thing to have so long as it's healthy. Prayers for global well-being versus, is it a personal religion versus a global religion? I hope I have convinced you in an indirect way that Hinduism isn't a personal religion in the way you would understand. It is a personal religion that my relationship with God is between me and my heart, which is a distance of 0, because God lives in my heart. That God may also reside in the deity or in all of you. But my relationship with my deity is in my heart. And so to that extent, it is an individual religion. But once you have surrendered yourself to that deity, you no longer exist individually. The well-being of all is in your interest. And so it is enlightened self-interest in that sense. Common misconceptions we talked about many gods is a common misconception. Just this weekend I hosted a group at the Livermore Temple. I spoke for 2.5 hours. That video is on YouTube. I could send it to you if you're interested. But we don't have many gods. We have many ways of understanding divinity. Caste system we talked about. Cows are holy because cows are holy. I don't have enough time to cover it, but it gets talked about all the time. What else are common misconceptions about Hindus that you might have heard of? Is it bad for you to say namaste? Do Indians mind that? They don't really mind that unless you're doing something nefarious, then please don't do it. Right? Let me just tell you a few more things that you might be practicing yourself but didn't know had deep sort of connections to Hinduism. We did the color piece, we did namaste. If you go to the yoga studio, that's of course directly from the Hindu tradition. If you're vegetarian like I am, or if you're thinking about being vegetarian, which country has the most thought on the idea of vegetarianism? It's India. If you are interested in ecology and in global well-being, then you have a set of ideas that come from India. If you're spiritual but not religious, what you're really saying is, I'm interested in Hinduism. Why? Because Hinduism is, if you're only interested in spirituality without the moral code, absolute moral code, then that's Hinduism. All of these, if you're interested in nature worship, I meet a lot of nature worship people, you're basically walking into Hinduism from different doors, but they all come to the same place. Did I miss anything at the back?
Can I have just first applause and thank you. I know we're really, people need to go on to other classes, but the tradition that we have about maybe one takeaway or two takeaways is a thanks to our speaker. Somebody want to, just something that they'll take with them outside of the classroom. An idea, a thought. Yeah.
Something you shared that I thought was really interesting was about the idea that when we're looking at someone else, like we see ourselves in them, and that being the reason for doing good, because I think a lot of the time we think about the reason behind good actions. So I thought that was a really interesting way to think about approaching it.
Thank you.
One more.
Well, I took a philosophy course last year, and a lot of what you said was really interconnected in like ideas to a lot of the great philosophers that I learned about. So I know that like knowing how much that course connected to like my life and how I like experience the world, I know that your talk will really like help me like see things in a lot in different lenses.
Thank you. Thank you very much.